welcome. I'll go through the agenda. There are going to be some rejigs of the agenda as we go along, but the first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any? Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Pages 1 to 16. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up something which I don't believe is actually in the minutes from last time. At the start of last meeting, 22nd of March, I flagged up that the risk analysis on finance didn't come to full council in March, as promised.
Yeah, I've spoken to the Chief Exec about that, and it is in process. And we would be hopeful for it for the next meeting. It hasn't been done yet.
Well, it absolutely needs to come to next meeting because it was promised in March. And my opinion is that actually we shouldn't be making savings decisions until that risk analysis comes here, because we know that some of the savings aren't actually even achievable. So that must, as a matter of urgency, come to next council, please.
Yeah, I've just spoken to Craig, and apparently 151 officer will be giving an update when he Skypes in over it as well.
You mean next meeting?
Sorry?
Today?
Today.
Thank you.
Are there any other matters as far as the minutes are concerned?
Chairman, just for housekeeping, next time if we've got comments about the content of the minutes themselves, if we could raise them through urgent items or something.
Fine. And
just keep this part just for the accuracy.
Fine.
If that's all right.
Okay. Right, in that case, can we have a proposer that they're a true and accurate record? Proposed by Councillor Mumford. Seconded by Councillor Legg. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Right, Chairman's announcements. I've got a couple. I've just been contacted by Councillor Francis, who is unfortunately fog-bound as we speak at this moment at Landend Airport, and wishes me to convey personally his apologies for not getting here. We are going to be joined after the planning part of the meeting by Russell Ashman, our 151 officer, and who else was it? Sorry? Brian O'Neill as well, on the screen via Skype. I am going to move item 14, which is the scrutiny recommendations, into part 1, as there is a note that we need to, as an authority, vote upon that we have noted it. It will actually come in as as item 13 or 12A, whichever way you want to look at it. Right. I have no questions under Standing Order 14. We then have committee minutes on pages 17 to 24.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to present the minutes of the Inshore Fisheries Conservation meeting held on the 5th of April. Present them to full council as stated in the agenda pack.
Thank you. Are there any issues of accuracy on those minutes that we are aware of? Thank you. Right. They've been considered. I have no motions under Standing Order 12. Member updates are in part 2. Sorry, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I've been approached by Councillor Smith, who would like to ask a question on my written report. So the lead member for finance report is on page 105. So if I could just comment on that briefly at this point, or would you prefer to leave it later?
We'll do it till the end when we bring them.
Right,
is that okay?
Absolutely.
We'll bring questions on member updates later when they actually arise.
Fine.
Okay. Right. Moving on. Item 9, land at Parting Carn. Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report for the assessment of an application to change the use of an agricultural field for use as green waste composting and storage. There are no physical structures proposed, and the green waste will be composted in rows and not containerised. Materials will be taken from the waste site at Porthmelon, and the amounts will vary depending on the time of year. You'll note from the report that at the time of drafting, there were no consultation responses from statutory consultees, particularly Natural England and the Environment Agency. You will note there is an addendum updating you on Natural England's response, and Craig is going to give you a verbal update on that. So since the report was published, we've received no objections from the Council's Environmental Health Officer, but we have received the response from Natural England, who do not consider there to be sufficient information on which to make give us advice. Officers have responded to Natural England seeking further clarification on the issues yet, and Craig will give you an update on that. But on the basis of the consultation responses, it's recommended that the application is delegated to the senior manager. This is just to show you the site, a parting card, and the two triple SIs, just either side. Thank you. Craig.
Chairman, if I could just briefly update members. I think the first thing I'd say in the context of the certainly Natural England representation is that we should always consider a proportionate approach based on the scale and any potential risks of an application. So we are talking actually about very low-key composting in this instance. So we're talking anywhere between 50 to 80 tonnes per annum, which actually is a very small scale. And obviously balanced by any potential benefits actually arising from obviously composting actually on island rather than actually exporting back to the mainland. And obviously there's a wider sustainability issue that we need to consider. For members' updates, I've had a conversation with the Environment Agency this morning. So they haven't formally they haven't formally submitted their representation, but they will be. So in principle, they actually support this proposal. There is an issue, slight issue, but it's not significant. But what they're saying is that they would support the approval of the application, but subject to a condition requiring a site drainage plan. Now that might sound onerous, but actually having spoken again to the Environment Agency, it's not particularly onerous. But what's important is certainly for the applicant, if we do approve this application, to be actually minded that it's absolutely essential to control any leachate and groundwater runoff to protect our precious and fragile groundwater resources. Okay, so a site drainage plan is one really more of management actually of the composting to ensure that there isn't any ground contamination to our pressure water resources. And certainly the view of the Environment Agency is that this is a much more preferable site than the site that first came in, because obviously that was actually quite close to Joni's well and was actually in a zone what we call SPZ1, which is actually ultra sensitive to groundwater contamination. So my view would be that the recommendation would be for members in the light of the Environment Agency discussion to actually approve, subject to conditions, including a site drainage plan.
I would approve. I would go with Craig on that process. It's heartening to hear the Environment Agency are taking a much more proportionate response to this application within Natural England. I feel have been tone deaf to the needs of the island. They talk about their response, talking about proposals up to 500 tonnes. And this site will last 2016 produced 60 tonnes of waste. The island produced 60 tonnes of green waste. So it's not, I think it's totally disproportionate to Natural England's concerns. So yeah, I would urge members to approve this proposal.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd support what Councillor Marcus says. It's heartening to hear the Environment Agency are happy. I think the Natural England response, frankly, is inadequate. It's not a good piece of work. It's got some factual inaccuracies in, and it's not proportionate. I'm mindful that this application, I think, is a decent application. I think this is the wider implications are that it has big implications for waste management on St Mary's, and for that reason, I would support that we pass this application.
Councillor Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Endorse what both councillors just said. At the end of the day, as stated in 26, it is only the view of Natural England and the Environment Agency. We are the planners and we can decide, and I would go with the recommendation.
Right, just for clarification, on the grounds that at the moment we've got 3 recommendations. There's 2 in the main agenda pack and there's 1 in the supplement. I'm going to pass over to Craig just so that we are absolutely clear as to what we are recommending. Craig?
So Chairman, it's very similar to recommendation 1, actually in the original agenda pack. So I'm recommending this application is approved, but obviously subject to the additional condition as well for a site drainage plan. And I think that is absolutely imperative as part of my recommendation for approval.
Councillor Smith?
So just to clarify, that would be a proposal to pass the application immediately, subject to an extra condition based on drainage.
Yes, that's the recommendation.
Then I would propose that we support that.
I'll second that.
Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 10. Can we just pause for 2 seconds before we move on to that one while we arrange the electronic link with the members that are on the mainland? Not members, the officers that are on the mainland. That's what we're doing New Frontiers now. Yeah. Yeah. Do we not need Matt Stokes on that one? Yeah. Oh, hold on. Are they? That's totally on, but okay. Okay, we haven't got the link at the moment, but I'm informed that that Matt Stokes is actually ill today, so won't be joining us. So we'll push on with agenda item number 10 about New Frontiers. I'd just like, as from the chair, to make a few initial comments about that. They're going to be fairly short. New Frontiers is a visionary document that has been laid by the leadership board. This is a starting point and is by no means cast in tablet of stone, and it also recognises that parts of the document are not at all applicable to the Isles of Scilly, and it is actually outlined within the document. But this is basically something that is going to be presented to Westminster eventually when it is refined, so that it gives us a platform to start the process of asks as far as Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly is concerned. There are certainly sections of it which you will have read that are very much not Scilly orientated, as in lithium mining, for instance, and the spaceport. Inasmuch as we, as a neighbouring authority to Cornwall, will support those asks as far as Cornwall is concerned, they are obviously not part of our agenda. Myself and the Vice Chair have attended the leadership board meetings, and this is a board that is comprised not only of Cornwall councillors and us, but there are also other very powerful beings on there that are influential as far as the direction of travel is concerned as the whole of Cornwall. And at that point, I'd just like it to throw it out to open debate. Sorry, Nicola, do you want to say a few words first? Sorry. Second, sorry.
Yeah, just quickly reiterate what you said. It really is a proposition document, and as you'll see within it, there are a number of asks that really try to see a proactive approach to create some resilience that is sustainable in terms of inclusive growth for both the economy, environment and social outcomes. So I think it's about seeing things holistically. And with any document that works to a leadership group made of 10 bodies, you're never going to meet everybody's needs all of the time, and not everybody's going to relate to everything else that's said in the document. So I think for us, there's some real clear links in there when it comes to things like energy in innovation zones, second homes tax, health and social care, and the use of technology to improve health and social care provision. So I think this is about being at the table, and I think the recommendations are quite clear. It's about endorsing this as a starting point for negotiations, to be at that leadership table, but to be clear that those asks that relate to the Isles of Scilly need to be tailored and specific for the Isles of Scilly. And whether it's done through this process or another process, there will be other asks of government as well. So I think it's just a starting point. It's about being at the table.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I totally get the comments about aspiration, but I sort of welcome some of the comments around inclusion as well, and some of the concepts which sit under the main headlines. I was just slightly surprised there was very little reference to transport in there, be that road, rail, air, and just wondered if that was something which is a gap. And I was also just wondering whether the leadership board could also focus on the whole trickle down of the concepts. It's sort of referenced in there, there's already been 2 decades of investment, but we're still looking at thousands of people living in poverty, underemployment, unemployed. So it's just what can be done so this money, if it does come, starts to hit some of those harder to reach people much sooner than 2 decades from now. And I think they were my main points now. So yeah, just a gap around transport. Surprised there's nothing there.
Yeah, can I, from my perspective, assure you that those are being talked about, even though they're not printed as a major heading within that. We have talked about transport. We've also talked about poverty, fuel poverty, and the like that within the leadership board, and it will be something that will be more majored in the next draft. I'm quite sure of that. Sorry, Councillor Watts.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think there is a missing word in recommendation 1. It says to this report as a starting point. I think there should be an aspirational starting point in there. I've gone through it fairly carefully, and I'm glad that several times throughout the document it said it's not a strategy but a proposition, which is just as well, because in section post-Brexit frameworks, which is later on, I think it's around about page 48, it monitors agriculture and fisheries, but the government has yet to publish anything in these areas with just 11 months to go. And details of how of a new domestic fisheries policy are not yet available. So I think aspirational starting point rather than one set in concrete.
Yeah, no, I've got a great deal of sympathy with what you're saying, and it is, a lot of it is aspirational, and it is a starting point, certainly. This was very much in focus. We've got, Vice Chair and I have got a leadership board meeting tomorrow in Truro, and we will certainly communicate that. And the rest of the leadership board are very aware of that view, and it is a view that is taken on board. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, there's some really interesting ideas, some really radical ideas in here, which are really good to hear. Yeah, the document needs to be rewritten. It's the most dense thing I've read since I've been a councillor. It's really hard. I lost the will to live quite a few times whilst reading it. So I would urge all these great powers to employ someone who can actually write English and inject a narrative into the document. Also, I'd just like to urge the chair and the vice chair to ensure that we as members have a say into some of these massive strategic directions. It feels a bit disconnected at the moment because there's some great ideas here, but we haven't been consulted with them. So, and the public here hasn't been consulted. Given that the local plan, we had such a big turnout, and the Isles of Scilly is really strong in terms of residential investment in the strategic direction of the authority, I think we could gain a lot and add a lot to this plan by consulting with members and the public as well, and add some real value to it. So I would just urge that there is more of a dialogue, backwards and forwards dialogue.
There will be, unfortunately, due to timing. This was the first opportunity that we've had to bring this to full council due to the publication dates and the meetings, and it's just a coincidence of timing. But please be assured that I and the vice chair certainly want you, as the elected body of the islands, to be much more involved than just a rubber stamping or giving us authority to go and speak. There's no intention of that at all.
Okay, that's good. But given the comments Councillor Williams said about transport and things like that, we just need to know that there is a mechanism for inputting into this.
There will be, and I'll just re-emphasise that this really is embryonic, and it's the starting of a process, and this process is not going to be immediate, and it will be a long process, and members will be involved all along the way. Vice Chair.
Thank you. As colleagues know, I sit on the Local Enterprise Partnership on behalf of the Council. And this document that you see before you is actually the third incarnation of the New Frontiers draft document I've actually been party to. And the first draft work, and it was very much a draft work, came to the Local Enterprise Partnership in November. And at the time, and as the process developed, colleagues agreed that it was obviously very Cornwall-centric because they're the largest geographical area, they've got the largest population, and for all sorts of reasons. We were obviously going to be a supportive, critical friend and partner, but we weren't obviously going to be as involved in the process as the majority partner. And as it's developed, it's become apparent and acknowledged in this document that parts of it are not relevant to us at all. And in fact, parts of it would be very disadvantageous to us were we to support, for example, the retention of business rates and some of the finance arrangements. But as it's become more of a document to be taken forward, I think there is a need for the Council of the Isles of Scilly and all of the Council of the Isles of Scilly to have more democratic input into it. And with the Chair's approval, I think possibly it's something that we could raise tomorrow at the Leadership Board and ask for the relevant councillors and or officers to come to Scilly, and perhaps we could have a workshop on this document. Because I do think there's a lot of good ideas in it and a lot of merit. But I totally agree with Councillor Marcus, it is one of the most dense documents that I've had in my council career. And it's come to me several times, and each time I read it, I seem to find more in it. So there is a lot in it, but I think it's a work in progress. I'm happy that we endorse the direction of travel, but on the premise that it is exactly that, a work in progress, we will decide the bits of it that are relevant to us and the bits that we would like to stand back. As I said to the leader of Cornwall Council at a previous meeting, we're totally supportive of your devolution journey, and lots of this is very entwined with your devolution journey, but we're not signed up for devolution, as colleagues know. So we have to pick out the bits that are good for us and work on them, and hopefully take this whole thing forward and use the bits that are good for us. And would you like to think that that is the way forward and approve it, Nicola? Yes.
And that the workshop be held for member engagement as part of this ongoing process.
Councillor Barclay.
Thank you. I'd like more reassurance somehow that this document will not just be relegated to the archives, as so many strategic documents have been. I mean, over years, and I know we shouldn't refer to the past, but we've seen so many visions and strategic documents that are just, quite frankly, at the end of the day, meaningless. I'd like to be reassured that tomorrow, when you attend that, you determine that that is the main factor that the answer Silly's inclusion in this is not a meaningless exercise. And I think as far as the workshop is concerned, it would be helpful if this council could discuss some of these points initially before meeting with the members of the board.
Yep, certainly Councillor Barker, be assured that the Vice Chair and myself will take that view forward without a problem whatsoever. We don't want it put on a shelf gathering dust either, and we will also take the idea of a workshop so that we can go through it in far more detail in the relatively near medium future to the board tomorrow. Is that sufficient?
It is, but the proof of the pudding...
It will be in the eating, I agree, yes. Councillor Sims?
Well, I'm glad you said what you just said, and I didn't completely endorse what Councillor Watt just said. A lot of these strategic documents are ending themselves and nothing happens. And looking through this one, I mean, particularly the spaceport, it's not talking about Devon and Cornwall, it's talking about Narnia. Outside of Europe, we are not going to have a viable spaceport, too far from the equator for a start. I mean, I feel it's mostly optimism and hot air. It'd be lovely if it came off, but I just don't see it.
Councillor Davis?
Oh, thank you. This was discussed at some length at the Transformation Board meeting that I attended a few days ago. I've read it through twice. It's been changed since, as our Vice Chairman says, so it's had several iterations, as it were. I regard it, obviously endorsing what's been said previously about it being aspirational, but I view it with some enthusiasm, because I think the previous Westminster government saw Cornwall as different to the rest of the country, being a peninsula, and I tend to take the strategic view. The idea of an assembly for Cornwall fell by the wayside, but there's going to be a lot of national changes in the next 18 months, as we're all well aware, and I think it's a good sign that Cornwall has signed up and is showing some enthusiasm for the way forward. I don't think, as I said from my meeting a few days ago, that this is going to be ignored. I think this is pivotal, and I look forward to seeing it develop with enthusiasm. Yes, of course, we have to show our democratic right in questioning the bits that apply to us, but it's obviously directed mainly at Cornwall, and there obviously are some areas that we need to be involved in. But as I say, I think it's a good move, and I would suggest that we all look at it very carefully and rush out and buy some shares in lithium. I mean, the government wants to have electric cars by 2040 or whatever it is, and the international shipping industry is looking at driving ships and realizing that, I know this is pertinent to our environment as well, are the factor, as are the aircraft that fly over us. They're damaging the environment all the time, and they're looking towards changing and driving shipping by natural resources. So there's going to be a lot of change, as we all realize, in the near future. And I would endorse this as a good sign that Cornwall is at the forefront of realizing and accepting these changes. Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Now, just check from Councillor Grotty whether that was an extra recommendation to ensure that we have a workshop. Are you proposing a recommendation?
No, with respect, if the chairman and I could be with your approval, if you leave it to us to
I think there was an extra
the invitation, I think we don't need it as a formal recommendation, I would suggest. If you would take our assurance that we will make every effort to have further discussion, both as a council amongst ourselves and also with input from outside.
I think Nicola kind of proposed an extra recommendation for a workshop, was that?
It's for you members to decide, but it would formalise the agreement.
Sorry, I wasn't aware that you actually wanted that as part of the recommendation. But
I think it gives clarity.
Of course, I defer to you, of course.
Or I would support a workshop for us, yeah, as early as possible.
Wondering if we combine that with the work that we're doing around the corporate plan, and we can see the interlinkage between the two as well. So I think it's all about that strategic direction and have that discussion first, and then we can feed into, or we can feed up from the corporate plan as well. So then starts to join together, and it's not then just a strategy, it's about our actions moving forward.
I applaud the logic, but that's going to be one heck of a big workshop. Yeah, or I don't think we need to limit ourselves to one, as far as that is concerned. Sorry to put extra time on everybody, but as far as corporate plan and this is concerned, I think it might be difficult to progress it in one workshop. So
I'm not suggesting one, I'm suggesting a workshop on this.
Alone.
And then a separate, so I propose, could I propose a third recommendation that we ask the membership of the leadership board to carry out a workshop for members as soon as possible?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say that anyway. I would prefer on a personal basis to keep this one as a unit on its own and not cloud the issues. Vice Chair?
Yes, it's just that you have put in your recommendation, Councillor Marcus, that you would like members of the leadership board to actually come and get involved. I think it might be more appropriate. It might be that, for example, it might be a Cornwall County Council colleague who had been involved in the actual membership of that workshop.
Okay, the leadership board organise a workshop for
the relevant officers.
Yeah.
Will that do you? Yeah. Thank you.
Officers and members.
Officers and members, yeah. Okay, so is there any more discussion about it before we move on to the recommendations? We've got now we've got 3 recommendations, including the one with the workshop. Councillor Watts, was your addition of aspirational a proposal, or was it just a recommendation at the time?
Well, that was a suggestion, but I'm quite happy with recommendation 1.
You are, as it stands, okay. Right, can I have a proposal first for the first 2? I'll take those 2 recommendations then.
Yeah, I'll propose.
Yeah, proposed by Councillor Marcus, seconded by Councillor Watt. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And the third one, I haven't got the wording of it yet, but that we hold a workshop regarding new frontiers at some time in the future with relevant officers and members to present the information. Is that sufficient for you? Yep. Can I have a proposer for that? Proposed, Councillor Marcus, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That's unanimous as well. Thank you very much. Item 11. Future of public health nursing. Aisling, do you want to say a few words on this to start with? Or do we want to link in with...
We're going to link in and I'll just say a few words to introduce it.
Can we just link in with Cornwall first? Can you hear us in Cornwall?
Hello?
Yeah, try again.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Right, hello there. Hello, Brian O'Neill and Russell Ashman. It's Aisling Khan here. I'm just going to just give you a little bit of introduction and then you can launch forward then, Brian. So this paper was a bit late. It's to do with the fact that Brian works for Cornwall Council, so he's balancing governance between Cornwall Council and our own council here. Just to explain, public health nursing is basically what you'd recognise as health visitors and school nurses. In about 3 or 4 years ago, following the transfer of most public health functions to local authorities from the NHS, health visiting and school nursing also moved in terms of a commissioning responsibility to local authorities. We have a service level agreement with Cornwall Council who commission all public health mandated functions on our behalf. So we spend about 134,000 a year through Cornwall Council to access their contracts around school nursing, smoking cessation, weighing children, alcohol abuse. So this bit of the service is about 60,000, which is about school nursing and health visiting, and it's about the future of the contract. We are not in a contractual relationship with any provider currently. Cornwall Council are. So this was a whole options proposal looking at what to do now that the contract has ended, and there's a recommendation here. I had a conversation with the lead member for children and vice chairman of council yesterday. Because of the timescales of when Brian wrote the paper and me going on leave, I think there's an additional bit of a recommendation, which is just about how the detail of the future relationships will be spelt out in our service level agreements. Is that okay, Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, am I going to take that continue?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So first of all, I want to say that the options proposal has taken place not because there is any dissatisfaction with the current provider. In fact, they have received the rating approved through the CQC, and they are highly performing for the service reviews, development reviews that we commissioned for them. There are a number of other issues that are coming into play. Firstly, it is a no-base contract that's been extended that we received from NHS England, and it's been extended for a further 2 years. And in fact, we're extending it now until March 19, as a result of trying to bring this in line with one vision and a whole range of other contracts at the same time. The other issue is that public health has lost 20% of its funding over a 4-year period due to midterm financial planning. This does not aid us to continue slicing the current contract, but actually go out for a new contract that looks at how we work in a much more integrated way to look at efficiencies and how we deliver public health interventions over a broader workforce. So those are two of the key things. You have mentioned that the health and social care act brought on responsibilities to protect, promote and improve the health of the population, and with it we innovated the school nursing contracts in 2013 and now visiting one in October 2015. So this has brought forward us to consider a range of options around where we go with health visiting and school nursing. So there are a range of delivery models available, either to try and extend the current contract with the current provider, to go out to competitive tender to what is potentially a very small market, or integrate services with the Cornwall Council Children's Services with considerations for how that will look for the hours of service. So, looking at current NHS providers who are seeking activity, who we've had quite a lot of history with, there are a number of private companies about, and some local authorities have done awards to Virgin. In fact, Devon, our neighbour, is now moving from Virgin to an in-house option. In-house options exist in a number of places: Cleveland, Redcar, Swindon, Devon, Somerset, Suffolk, Lincolnshire, Camden, Newark, Windsor, Brighton, Hove and City of York. So it's not a new concept, but it's one born out of a number of factors. Not necessarily the dissatisfaction of the NHS provider, but our practicality in managing the budget and delivery of public health outcomes in a more integrated way. So we looked at the 3 options against 12 criteria, and these criteria we used to look at how we easily could integrate with other services, deliver statutory duties, ability to innovate, financial visibility, and we also had a weighting to this. We also want to bear in mind that integrating with council children's services isn't the only option. There are a range of other services that would be impacted by this around primary care, mental health, sexual health services, camps, and so on. So, what we also want to say is that there's been quite a lot of issue of engagement with children and families around counselling, families and children are identified as a single front door to enable them to get into services that it should be delivered seamlessly as a step-up, step-down model, and have a record that could pass across agencies rather than multiple different systems with different firewalls and sharing. So that leads me to looking at the options and the scoring that has taken place. And I just want to highlight a few issues. So if you
anything you want to ask before that's a word.
Good morning, Brian. I've got a couple of clarifications, queries, and also the second recommendation that Aisling mentioned a few minutes ago. So if I can just go through those in a sort of bit of a ramble. The first one was around, could you clarify issues around impartiality? It could look from the outside that Cornwall Council Public Health are recommending that Cornwall Council Children's Services take on a contract worth best part of £11 million. So I just wanted to clarify when you were doing your risk appraisals, how independent, how impartial that process was. I'd also just like some assurances that with the change, however the change takes place, that local capacity for staff on Scilly would remain at least as it is at present. And also, just if you could just explain a little bit more about clinical governance in the process. Perhaps if we could do those three, then I can talk about the second recommendation that we have.
Can I ask, actually, I'm going to have to ask you if you can repeat those questions because of the acoustics in the room, and they didn't come through clearly at all.
I'll try again. First one was around impartiality, and I mentioned that is there potential for an accusation that Cornwall Council Public Health are awarding Cornwall Council Children's Services a contract of best part of £11 million? Is that being picked up?
Okay, so if I get the question right, is it saying about impartiality as a concern, and are we awarding essentially a public health nursing budget to be used by other services or the risk of use by other services? Is that what I'm hearing?
It is. If you could just explain how you feel impartiality has been built into your processes.
I mean, certainly within the public health team, we will still retain an independent commission to hold the services to account to deliver in a value for money way against the objectives and the mandated services that we have to deliver under this contract.
Okay.
John, I think you should ask them questions out on that. I don't think he's picking up through
Okay. So yeah, Brian, it's Aisling again. So there's two more questions. One is about reassurance that current provision on the islands is not affected by this particular decision, which actually I can say by this particular decision, no, but future decisions we can't predict because that's all about us all looking at budgets as we move forward over the next few years, but currently no. And the third one is about clinical governance. And again, my understanding is that the entire arrangements for clinical governance would move along with frontline practitioners. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, so we've been in conversation with the TPC. We have a clinical governance team.
Reference to the SLA arrangements brings us on to the second recommendation that we, Aisling and Fran and I were sort of discussing yesterday. I don't know if Brian can hear, but is it best me?
Okay, Brian, hello, it's Aisling again. Hi. So this is the suggested recommendation. Is it okay for me to say this on behalf of members? The recommendation 2, that specific working arrangements for integrated provision on the Isles of Scilly and associated policies, processes and procedures are described in a revised SLA between Cornwall Council and the Council of the Isles of Scilly. because obviously you have to have kind of, due respect to the fact that we have our own early help strategy, our own integrated care team here, our own ways of working, and that obviously children's social care and the accountabilities within working together remain with the Council of the Isles of Scilly. So we just need to reflect that when we come up to drawing up the next SLA, that they are all embedded.
Yeah, and if you can pen me those words, because I couldn't write them all down, I would say that that is absolutely a reasonable request.
And then it's obviously members, I think it's...
Just for me to chip in, I think that is more of a recommendation of reassurance than anything, that the services won't be affected by this decision.
Yeah.
So I can get that, so...
Our intention is to maintain the services, close working relationships with your services on the island.
Can I just intervene and say, obviously we have a public health budget. We made a decision when all the contracts were novated out of the NHS into the local authorities. We made a decision not to have the bits of contracts that related to the children of the Isles of Scilly and adults of the Isles of Scilly. They didn't come to the Council of the Isles of Scilly because it was decided at the time that trying to manage 134,000 across a range of mandated functions was not going to be a good use of resource. For example, you need to employ a director of public health. So it was decided at the time not to unpick the different bits between Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, but to work with Cornwall Council. So our director of public health is shared, and we share a range of commissioning functions. The budget itself, the public health budget, comes directly to the Council of the Isles of Scilly. We are in a position where we can commission those services ourselves at any point, including public health nursing. But my professional recommendation is that that would be unsustainable, because if you take 60,000 out and you think about the direct employee costs, all the professional supervision that you'd want them to have, all that backup team support, if there's sickness on the islands, I don't think you get a sustainable model. I'd much rather we continue with our local workforce being part of that bigger organisation in terms of resilience and clinical supervision. But we still do have fundamentally the accountability for the delivery of public health outcomes on the Isles of Scilly. So all it is about this bit of provision, where will it be provided by? So rather than Cornwall Partnership Foundation Trust, the recommendation is that it will be Cornwall Council as the provider, but they will be the provider, and as us as commissioners will say to that provider, but we want you on the Isles of Scilly to work in this specific way. Does that help?
Councillor Marcus? I was just going to ask, so the recommendation 2 just applies to the new agreement rather than the current agreement? Yeah, that's all, yeah.
Is there any more debate on that before we move on? Sorry, Councillor Mumford.
I'll have to keep my finger on it. Yes, I think we all need what's the best outcome for these islands. And that's what we've got to think about. We seem to be doing an awful lot with Cornwall at the moment, but if it's for the best for the islands, then I go with that.
Are there any more comments before we move on to the Councillor Barclay?
Thank you. I'm slightly unclear, sort of working from the bottom up with actual services. With what I consider very important is the quality of the school nursing service. Will that be affected in any way by a decision today, looking at the different options? Because I think that the closer the practitioners can work with their equivalents from the mainland, probably from CPFT, then the better for our children. When you look at the health issues today, like youth obesity and mental health, we really want good professional services, because in an isolated area like Scilly, these things can assume very important proportions.
So absolutely, the health visiting and school nursing team service on the islands is fantastic, and the way it works as part of the multi-agency team with children's social care, police, primary care, community health is fantastic, and that was picked up in the Ofsted single inspection, where we got good in every category, and we absolutely feel all the obligations of working together. We see health visitors fully engaged in the early help strategy, writing early help assessments, noticing issues for children and families at a very, very young age, which means we can do very early interventions and help get families back on track as soon as possible to minimise crises. I think there's a risk whenever you come to the end of a current contract and you're looking at the new options, there's always a risk that you may lose some quality, but there's also an opportunity that you may improve things. As the commissioner of this service, I wouldn't want to see any diminution of the role and outstanding work going on locally. And so that would be my responsibility if I felt the new arrangements, be that with Cornwall Council or Cornwall Partnership Foundation Trust, which is also a mainland organisation, or any other provider, if I thought that service wasn't as good as it should be, and there are very clear outcomes laid down in statute about what is expected, then we'll make a fuss. And of course there's that risk, and obviously that's the risk that we'll manage as commissioners to make sure that the quality of the service not only is stabilised but improved. And the thing is, a lot of what the ambition described here for Cornwall Council Children's Services, we're already doing here. We've got that integrated care team. We don't need to co-locate anyone because we have health visitors and school nurses and social workers talking to each other all the time. We have our health visitor attending children's centre every single week to give advice on sleeping and eating. And so all that really great early help, helping children get the best possible start in life is happening. And we want to protect that.
That's what we should be focusing on. And we knew that we had a problem with the numbers of our children that needed to access some sort of mental health support. And obviously prevention is better than cure. And we went in to support an early age, extra provision at school in terms of pastoral care. And it's had been reflected really well in the figures. Will this have any effect on that? No, that family support worker service is commissioned by us and is being delivered as completely separate. CAMS is completely separate. This is specifically about 0 to 19 health visiting and school nursing services.
Are there any more comments? Well, we have two recommendations. I'd just ask Councillor Williams to read the second one so that we can all be clear on what we're talking about.
It's currently worded as that specific working arrangements for integrated provision on the Isles of Scilly and associated policies, processes and procedures are described in a revised service level agreement between Cornwall Council and the Council of the Isles of Scilly.
Right, do we have a proposer for the two recommendations? I think we can take them together. Proposed by Councillor Davis, seconded by Councillor Guy. All those in favour of recommendations 1 and 2? That's unanimous. No, it isn't. Sorry. Oh, it is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on. Item number 12, One Vision Governance. Ashley? You want to say something? Sorry.
Is about us participating in One Vision fully. So in Cornwall, the One Vision Partnership Board and the Children's Trust Board are now one and the same. Obviously, we've retained our own Children's Trust Board because, again, we're a unitary authority with our own accountability for children's social care and a range of associated services. However, we want to be at the table, and the One Vision Partnership is all about bits of stuff we've talked about earlier, about integration, about making sure children have one front door, about seamless services, about shared IT systems. So there'll be meetings about 3 or 4 times a year. I am proposing that I would go, that the lead member for children would go, that a parent carer representative would go, and that somebody from Health Watch who's got a specific portfolio around children would go, so that we've got that balance between executive powers, elected member powers, and then also the representation from children and families themselves and from Health Watch, who are meant to be at the heart of commissioning decisions into the future. So I think there'll be a budget implication of about up to about £1,500, £2,000 a year. The first two meetings it will mean an overnight stay, but very kindly, the entire partnership have agreed that in the future, the meetings will be 11 till 2, so we can do it in a day. We'll try and keep costs down. I don't think we should do it through technology. I think that's absolutely a meeting that's going to be really good, particularly, I think, for our community members to meet other people and be right in there representing the views of the residents of the Isles of Scilly. The idea is then that anything that happens at One Vision Partnership Board will be reported back to our own Children's Trust Board and vice versa. I will be attending the exec groups in between, which are going to coincide with the Safeguarding Children's Partnership meetings, again, making best use of time and making sure that we are at the heart of all future commissioning decisions. Because as we know, when you talk to children and families, where things go wrong for them, it's actually accessing services which are based on the mainland, not services here. So, and that's a lot to do with how things were commissioned years and years ago. And now as contracts come up and we're looking at the future, it's really, really important that everybody remembers what it's like to live 28 miles out in the sea and miss school to go to medical appointments. So I just want us four to be there, making a fuss and banging the drum.
Just as a comment from the chair, I think it's eminently sensible, and I personally support this. The only comment I would make is that you may have difficulties in day trips in winter, Aisling.
I've just been really optimistic.
I know you do. Opening up comments and debate. Councillor Marcus.
I guess given that day trips in winter are is there a fallback for using technology for those? I understand the importance of being in the room, but it's better to have attendance at the meeting than not be there at all.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And I think that's one of the big benefits of this new system is I think we are now starting to get into our stride now about how to connect better to meetings in Cornwall. So I think there will be an option, but I think our favoured method is
sure.
I think it's just to get your approval of the kind of budget implication, which will be up to 2,000. But of course, we will attend by any means, if it's by phone if necessary, rather than not be there at all.
Cool. Yeah, and the only other thing was, like I said, with the previous item was about accountability and how that feeds back to members. So it's good that it's going to be in Children's Trust Board as well. But if there's any strategic implications to integration, anything like that, that needs to come to a wider forum.
Well, yeah, because Children's Trust Board does not have financial decision-making powers. So absolutely, it would always come to full council if we were at that stage.
Any further comments? Councillor Williams?
I'm just building on Councillor Marcus's comments about cascading information down. It just occurred to me that we need to make sure there's clearly links between this and the leadership board, which I think you and the vice chair are represented at tomorrow. There was lots in the previous paper about services for children and young people. So again, it's just making sure that anything at this sort of level is going up as well as coming down. Yeah. But I applaud. I think the sort of representation is broad. It's not all local authority. I think Scilly should be well represented when people are there.
Yeah, fully agree with that. I've no problem with that at all, and we will do our best to ensure that that happens. Any further comments? Right, we have a recommendation that members approve the representation. Do we have a proposer for that? Proposed by Councillor Guy, seconded by Councillor Mumford. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Part 1. We went ping. Oh, sorry. Councillor Mumford.
Sorry, I just swapped. Thank you. I sent this paper for council. I'll take the paper as read. The recommendation is to note and support two aspects that arose from the scrutiny panels. Council is not being asked to make a decision as these have already been actioned and will return to full council in due course. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, the reason that we brought it into part 1 because there was a
yes,
note and
actually,
and it enables.
It should have been scrutiny update instead of scrutiny recommendations, but we thought better to go into part 1.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just got a question on point 4, question 116. In light of funding secured, now not clear what this funding is and what it is for.
So my team in Children's Services have secured some revenue funding from the Department for Education to overcome any barriers to uptake of 3 and 4 year old childcare. So we identify potentially transport. We therefore have some money to commission some resource, because there is no internal capacity to look at the options, to talk to the community and all the various stakeholders, including transport providers, about a more sustainable model for off-island children to access those services. I think a likely outcome of that will be the wider benefits to children who aren't 3 or 4 or older, younger, and adults and older people. So it's a good opportunity, I think, to bring together a lot of the thinking that's gone on around this. And we are currently looking at some resource, and our chief executive is talking to colleagues at Cornwall Council to see if they've got anyone in their commissioning team that might be able to do this as a project. We've got to get it done by, I think, June. So there's some momentum here.
Okay, Councillor Mumford?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to support very much items point 7, improvements in the clarity of communicating the committee's recommendations to council in relation to decisions are being made. I think all of us recognise that we're all working with our new working arrangements and looking at ways that we can enhance them. And one of the things I would like to ask the Chair of Scrutiny to consider is whether or not we ought to have some sort of formal mechanism whereby lead members can actually be involved at a slightly earlier stage. I fully understand they can't sit on the committee. I totally understand why not. But if there's a protocol that might be helpful so that lead members be formally perhaps informed if the subject under discussion is part of their portfolio area or service area.
Councillor Mumford?
I think lead members will be consulted if necessary.
Yeah, with respect, I understand with necessary, the phrase when necessary is subjective. As lead member for finance, I feel that I would like a little bit more information about the internal audit reports before they actually come to committee. Without being intrusive, of course, I do understand the separation of responsibility, but we'd just like to feel a little bit more in the loop as early as possible, in a positive way. I'm not being, I hope, at all negative. I'd just like to be very supportive of the work that Scrutiny is doing and like to be as involved so that I'm aware really. I would fully understand the separation of roles.
Yeah, I'd like to just reiterate that scrutiny should be independent of the business, the day-to-day business of council. If scrutiny decides they want to speak to a lead member or a lead officer, then it's up to them to invite that lead member or lead officer in. That shouldn't be presumed. And I think it's important for the lead member to be involved in their own area of responsibility as and when they are. So to take ownership of that.
Coming away since we were appointed as lead members, I've been looking at this. I agree with the Vice Chairman. I don't quite understand point 7. Quite frankly, I struggle to understand the way this council's organised at the moment, and I'm wondering if we're actually legal. As I understand it, you either have a committee system or you have a leader than cabinet. We don't have a leader than cabinet. We have a pseudo committee system because certain statutes say scrutiny committee, but then lead members are not on the scrutiny committee, which I think is questionable because obviously we should be involved in general matters and stand aside when, as we do in full council, when matters are pertinent to our own roles, which I understand, but quite frankly, I feel isolated. Okay, our roles are being evaluated, but I've had no contact at all with scrutiny committee. They haven't come to me and asked anything. I don't know if any of my concerns or role issues have been discussed informally or formally in scrutiny committee. I just, quite frankly, don't think it's working, and I think that in many ways I'm just wasting my time.
Councillor Sims?
What was I going to say? Oh, yes, regarding the members, we have discussed it quite recently, that it's actually would be quite useful for lead members, all members in fact, but maybe in particular lead members, if they actually come across what they think are issues, to actually bring it to the attention of the chair of the scrutiny committee. So it should be a two-way process, but I tend to agree that then you need some sort of level of separation, and I don't really think you should have lead members on scrutiny, because you might as well have the whole council on it in the end, but we should almost be that. If lead members are on scrutiny as well, it's fairly pointless. I strongly think it should work on the basis of a parliamentary, whatever those select committees. Yeah, they said that you do not get government members on those committees. It would be preposterous. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the actual structure at the moment. Though I would probably agree with Adrian to an extent that maybe some tweaking would be appropriate. But then again, it's still relatively early days.
I would agree. I think scrutiny's been valuable so far. I think the boating review has led to officers trying to get some more money for the boating, led some clarity around that. I am disappointed with the lead member for adults' comments that he feels isolated and disconnected from the council. If he does, then he needs to get more involved. Simple as that. Then, you know, it just seems to me this paper, maybe, I'm just questioning why this paper is even here, to be honest, why we're talking about this, because it's, you know, if scrutiny's got recommendations, they will come to council. These are just updates. This could have been done via email. So,
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I think just to flag up on the process, I think there has been a problem with the mechanism here in getting the scrutiny recommendations to full council. So I would flag that up as well, it's only more than a teething problem, but it has been a problem. However, I think this is a very important bit of work around the interline boating, which I'd like to just discuss a little bit further, but perhaps you want to just tie up the issues around.
Councillor Mumford?
Yes, I'd just like to say that we are at the moment just doing a scope for adult social services. So we will be contacting Councillor Davis. In fact, there is a half-written email to him at the moment, which I started last night, but I haven't finished it yet. And if we need to see leader of place, like we did for the waste, we did contact him for the waste. And I strongly believe that scrutiny should stay very independent.
Councillor Williams?
Chairman, I would agree with Councillor Marcus. I think we've shot ourselves in the foot. This paper, until 9:30, I had no idea was even being discussed today. I think it's been written as an update and is developing into a discussion with other recommendations. I think it can't be one and it can't be the other. I would suggest we do a proper report with proper recommendations that we can prepare for.
This is an update, and the only reason it was brought to part one was because there was a recommendation to note, and we have to endorse a note. That was all.
It just seems to be going from what the paper is to a whole different discussion without perhaps proper preparation.
Yes, I think Councillor Williams is right. It should have been in part 2, and if it hadn't had the word recommendations written up at the top, it would have remained in part 2.
Yeah. Councillor Smith?
Having said all that, we do have recommendations from the November meeting, which still haven't come as formal recommendations to full council. I am very mindful of timescale on this, in terms of that if we are going to look at an inter-island boating model, frankly, we need to get on with it. So my concern is how our scrutiny recommendations are taken to full council, hopefully supported and then actioned. So that is my concern with this process.
I think from the chair, I think there has been value in discussing it. It aired some of the problems that may be bubbling under the surface. And I think that's possibly the useful thing, and it puts us all mindful of that. Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps this is something that could come to DPP, the upcoming DPP meeting?
Yeah, that's more than reasonable, yeah. Councillor Mumford?
Yes, we have had teething problems with this, but panel system didn't actually, it worked to a certain extent, but one of our main problems is we haven't got enough officer resources.
Yeah. Right, we've got the recommendations as in front of you. We've had a reasonable discussion about it, and it's aired though. Sorry, you want to say something else, Councillor?
Yeah, in terms of the recommendation 1A, I feel it needs a timescale put on it.
So, sorry, I missed that.
I feel it needs a timescale put on 1A.
1A.
Sorry, I thought I said by June. By June.
By June? July Council? Okay, with that amendment, have we got a proposer for the recommendations? Proposed by Councillor Sims, seconded by Councillor Mumford. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. At this point, I'd like to bring in Russell Ashman. Are you there, Russell? Can you still hear us? Hello? Can you get... Yes, thank you. Would you like to say a few words, Russell? Are there any questions? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you can hear me, Mr. Ashman, or not. Hello, can you hear me?
Can you hear Councillor Smith, Russell, or not?
Let's go round.
2 seconds, he's moving to the other microphone.
Right, hello. I think it's only the laptop picking up the mic, so sorry about that. Welcome. Delighted to have you as the 151 officer. Just a question regarding the risk analysis. Could you put a firmer timescale on that, please? Because it was due to the March meeting. That's why I'm pushing for it.
Yeah, it is. I think that Chief Executive said to me that it's an item that he seemed to have missed that was agreed I had a discussion with him about 10 days ago, and he's asked me to have a look at it. I'm going to bring something forward, but we've started work on it. And my idea is that the Mayfield Council is the annual meeting, and it's on the 8th of May. Just a little bit worried that whether I look and do something and liaise with the Chief Executive and his senior management team by then. Certainly it will be done very soon after that. If I can't bring it to the May meeting, so it will definitely come to the June. Just the timing of that May meeting just makes it a little bit tight compared to, it's the 19th of April today, so the 8th is not very long away.
Yeah, understood. If you could aim for that, that'd be great, and if not, June would be good. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you for that, Russell. We all look forward to working with you. And just as an update to members, that Russell did work with our previous 151 officer extremely closely, so he's more than just aware of the financial situations that we are in and have been in and are progressing. And a lot of the groundwork and spade work was actually done by Russell on Andy Brown's behalf. But a very warm welcome, Russell, and we will see you in the future. Thank you very much for chipping into the meeting.
Thank you. And any other meetings I can, just say, shorten the agenda and some other issues I had over the week that couldn't make it, but I intend to send all the walk out to these things well effective.
Yeah, I think the Skype interaction has worked eventually today, and we've been thankful for it. Thank you. And in that case, I now close the meeting at. Oh, sorry. No, there is one few bits and pieces on member updates. Jonathan. Sorry, Councillor Smith, did you want to make a point on any of the member updates that are in part 3?
I'll just make a point that we're now going into part 2, so we're not going to be able to make any decisions at this point.
No,
just so you know that.
Yeah, no decision to make. We're in part 3 now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I just want to ask regarding Councillor Grottick's comments on the IT system where it's continuing to progress. I mean, obviously the rollout of the IT has caused a lot of problems to staff, to members and the public. But I think the biggest impact has definitely been on staff, and I've talked to quite a few who've really had very serious issues with the IT rollout. So my question really is around who's taking responsibility for the problems, how the problems being fixed, how the lessons being learned, and what was the project management on it. And frankly, I think somebody needs to stand up and say, there was a problem, buck stops here, and the problem's going to be rectified.
The overall management of it rests with the sponsor board, and I'm chairman of the sponsor board. That's the corporate collaborative board between Osseley and Cornwall and the IT department. And I have brought this to the fruition, and Doug, I've forgotten his surname now, has been on top of the issues and admits that there have been teething problems greater than anticipated. I think part of the problem was, as I understand it, is that we had so many functions going on at one stage with the implementation of new hardware, finance systems, billing systems and whatever, and we ran before we could walk. But I will bring it on our behalf to the next sponsor board meeting, which I'm not entirely sure when that is, but on members' behalf, I will bring those problems to and ask those questions for you, Councillor Smith.
Kind of just leads me to think why it's not everyone. So who was project managing the operation here? Yeah, about the sponsor board's fine, but here everyone knew what was going on and what was being transferred over.
Yeah.
To fall, and obviously I have previous knowledge and interest in this anyway, but it just seems inevitable, and that's unfortunate. to say the least, really. I mean, this situation we've got here at the moment, teething problems that we, a video conference with Cornwall at full council going through one laptop. It's not a teething problem. That's just lack of foresight and lack of planning. So.
Right. Okay, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'd just like to say and have it recorded that officer concerns are our concerns. We've had issues with our iPads. Some councillors have been without proper email connections for the best part of a month. That is totally unsatisfactory and it's been very difficult. But that's nothing to the impact on people's working lives. And there are some officers who have direct responsibility for very vulnerable members of our society. And if their working environment is compromised, then we have very real concerns. And I do think, without being negative, we do need to do what I believe in America is called a wash-up or whatever, and review what went wrong so that we can use it as a learning curve. And obviously I support the chairman discussing that sponsor board at the earliest opportunity.
Indeed. Councillor Williams.
I would I'm not wanting to tell you about a bottom-up issue from them on what they're facing, because I think some of these are more than teething. I think some of these are much more challenging than teething. So I'd just like to make sure that as chair of that board, you're hearing from the staff exactly what is a teething issue which can be sorted and what is a much more underlying.
I will take those issues to the sponsor board, certainly. Councillor Guy, do you want to?
Yeah, Chair, word I would use is lash up. I mean, maybe I'm speaking wrong saying this. I mean, here we are, modern technology with a £1,000 phone. Used to get emails on it, knew where I was going, it would bleep, it would tell me everything it was doing. I can't receive them with the new system on this phone now. And my iPad is still not working.
Okay. I think the main thing is to know how we log these issues. And I think there's a discussion we've been having with staff. We get into this 80-20 point with staff now, where 80% of people are now happy. And I'm having some positive discussions with people who work on the off island saying, actually, the kit's working really well. It's better than what we had before. So I think we've gone to the bottom and now working up. We've got to capture...
What I'm trying to say, I'm not interrupting. I can't understand why technology, where we are today, why has it stopped coming to one of the top of the range phones? Why? What's the reason? Is it?
So what I'm saying is there's a process in place here. So what we do have to do is capture the issues. So what was discussed at this week's leadership team was that member issues are funneled through TED so they can be fed back up to Cornwall to say these are the issues the members are still having, they haven't yet been resolved. And we're doing the very same with our officers as well. So I think it's about making sure we capture the issues. So instead of having a discussion here today, we should be saying, does everyone understand how you should be recording those as issues? Because unless they're recorded and passed on to the right people, they won't get resolved. So it's really important to go
but
through
I can actually tell you why you can't, and I'll tell you after the meeting why you can't get emails on your phone. There is a good reason for it, and I will go through that with you, Andy, if you wish. Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chair. On the point of raising issues, when I initially lost my emails, I raised the issue with the help desk, and when I eventually gained access to my emails again, I found that I had numerous emails from the help desk asking if I could get my emails yet. And when I didn't respond to them, they assumed that, yes, I must be able to get my emails. I think that speaks for itself.
Point taken, Councillor Legg. Right. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I think we've discussed some intricate kind of details, but we also have to look at the overview. And I think the overview is that there wasn't sufficient project management. And I think particularly the staff do owe an apology from the top. And I'd like to see that forthcoming.
Okay. Right. At the end of the meeting now, it is 10:55. I close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.